Picture the most expensive city in America in 1875. Now fill it with 500,000 people packed into streets that weren't built for half that many. Add coal smoke so thick it turns November afternoons into something close to dusk. Add a river that smells like a tannery on a hot day. Add the sound of 1,000 industrial machines running simultaneously, shaking the walls of the houses closest to the mills, vibrating through the floorboards, through the bones of anyone who works near them long enough. That's Philadelphia. The Athens of America, they call it. The cradle of liberty. A city of magnificent brownstone churches and Italianate mansions along Broad Street, where gas lamps light the way for ladies in silk and gentlemen in top hats who have never in their lives waited in line for water. And a city where, 6 blocks from those mansions, in the boarding houses of South Street and Lombard and Fitzwater, women sleep 3 to a room, cough through the winter and go to work anyway, because the alternative is worse. We're going there tonight, not as tourists, not as reformers clutching pamphlets about the conditions of the working poor. We're living it. One woman, one November, everything she would have felt, smelled, feared, and survived. I make these history stories, and honestly, I'm never entirely sure who falls asleep to a 45-minute lecture about 19th century laundry work, and who stays awake through the whole thing just to find out if she makes rent. Either way, get comfortable, pull up something warm, because where we're going tonight is cold and it stays cold for a while. Here we go. Your eyes open before the bell. That happens now. It didn't used to happen. Back in Germantown, back when you were still sleeping in the same room as your mother and your 2 sisters, your body had no reason to wake itself. The day started when it started. There was always someone to call you. Now your body has learned to wake itself at 5 in the morning, whether it wants to or not, because the consequences of sleeping through are bad enough that some primitive part of your brain has decided not to risk it. For a moment, half a second, maybe less, you lie perfectly still and try to remember where the cold is coming from. Then you remember. The window. The window in the room you share with Agnes Doyle and Clara Brennan faces north, and in November, north means the wind comes directly off the Delaware River 6 blocks away, and finds every gap in the frame and comes in anyway. The landlady, Mrs. Kessler, has stuffed rags into the worst of the gaps. It helps somewhat. It doesn't help enough. The cold settles over you like a second blanket, except this one works in reverse. You pull your actual blanket tighter. It's thin wool, the kind that itches even through your shift. And it's not enough for November. It was barely enough for October. By January, you'll need to sleep in your coat, which is what you did last year and which you are already resigned to doing again. Your name is Mary Callahan. You are 22 years old. You've been in this room on Lombard Street for 14 months, which makes you the longest standing tenant. Agnes has been here for 8 months. Clara arrived in September and still looks vaguely startled by everything, the way people do when they've moved from somewhere genuinely quiet to somewhere that's never quiet. You're from Germantown, which is Philadelphia, but not quite Philadelphia. A neighbourhood that still remembers when it was its own town, before the city swallowed it in 1854. Your father works at one of the paper mills up on the Wissahickon. Your mother takes in mending. You have 2 sisters, both younger, both still at home. You left because the paper mill doesn't hire women, the mending doesn't pay enough for 5 people, and the steam laundry on South Street was hiring at $4.50 a week. $4.50 a week. Which sounds like something, until you subtract $1.75 for the room, 60 cents for food you eat outside the boarding house, Mrs. Kessler provides breakfast and supper but not lunch. 15 cents for the streetcar when the weather is too bad to walk. 20 cents for soap and thread, and the small necessities that accumulate whether you want them to or not. That leaves you with a little less than $2 a week in theory. In practice, it leaves you with whatever's left after the weeks when someone is sick, or the machine breaks, or Mr. Hartman, the floor supervisor, decides that Tuesday's output wasn't satisfactory and docks the women's wages accordingly. This is the arithmetic of your life. You've done it so many times that it lives in your bones now, not your head. You don't calculate anymore. You just know. Agnes is still asleep, her dark hair loose around her face, one arm thrown over her eyes. She sleeps heavily, Agnes. She works the pressing irons, which means she stands for 14 hours lifting and pressing and lifting and pressing, and by the end of a shift her arms shake when she tries to hold a cup. She's earned her sleep. Clara is already awake. You can see the white of her eyes in the dim room, reflecting the faint grey light through the window. She's been awake a while, probably. Clara is from a village outside Lancaster, and this is her first winter in the city, and you don't think she's slept through a full night since October. Morning, you say, and your voice is wrong. This is the part you've been trying not to think about. The part that starts every morning now and gets a little worse each week. Your voice comes out thicker than it should, lower, rougher. And then comes the cough. Not immediately, but soon, because lying down compresses things in your chest that sitting up spreads out. And the difference between lying down and sitting up is apparently enough to trigger it. You sit up. The cold hits you from above the blanket. You suppress the cough for 1 more second, 2, 3, and then you stop suppressing it. Because suppressing, it has stopped working. The cough comes out of you like something that was waiting. Not violent. Not the dramatic racking kind you've seen in other women. Not yet, but persistent. 5, 6, 7 coughs that scrape the inside of your throat and leave a raw, dragged across gravel feeling behind. Clara watches you with those wide Lancaster eyes. It's nothing, you say when the cough subsides. Your voice is still rough. Dry air. She nods. She doesn't believe you. You don't blame her. You've had this cough for 6 weeks. The room is 8 feet by 10 feet, which you know because you paced it once when you couldn't sleep and needed something to do with your hands. 8 by 10. A shared bed taking up most of one wall. A second bed, the one you sleep in, the better one you've earned by seniority, against the other wall. Between them, a narrow strip of floor maybe 2 feet wide that constitutes your living space. A single window. A washstand with a basin and a pitcher. A hook on. The back of the door for coats and good clothes. A small wooden crate under your bed that holds everything else you own. Not much else you own. You stand at the washstand and pour water from the pitcher into the basin. The water is cold in the way that water kept in a room all night in November is cold. Not ice cold, not yet, but cold enough to make you hesitate before you put your hands in. Cold enough to sting. You put your hands in anyway. This is one of the small disciplines of your life. Hesitation before cold water is a luxury. You don't have time for it. Your hands are not what they were 14 months ago. They were ordinary hands when you arrived. A little rough from helping your mother with laundry at home, but nothing remarkable. Now they're mapped with small cuts and cracks, mostly along the knuckles, mostly on the right hand. The skin is red in the way that skin gets when it's been wet and dried 1,000 times, and the redness doesn't go away anymore, not fully, not even on Sundays. There's a burn scar on the inside of your left wrist, 2 inches long, faded to silver now, from 8 months ago when a copper boiler shifted and caught you. You barely noticed it at the time. You were more worried about the shirts. You splash water on your face. The cold shocks you awake in a way that the cough didn't quite manage. You dry your face on the rough linen towel hung on the washstand rail. You dress. This is also a discipline. There's an order to it, and you follow the order every morning because mornings are not the time for decisions. You've decided everything in advance. There's your working dress, brown wool, practical, 2 years old, patched at the elbows, and your working apron, and your work boots, which are heavy and ugly and keep your feet dry, which is all you ask of them. There's the wool shawl you put over your shoulders before your coat, because the coat alone isn't enough between the boarding house and the laundry. There's the coin purse you keep pinned inside your bodice. This is not vanity or precaution against robbery, though robbery is a genuine concern in this neighbourhood. It's warmer close to your body than anywhere else, and sometimes, on the coldest mornings, the coins are the only warm thing about you. You pin the purse, you button your coat, you push your feet into your boots and lace them with numb fingers. Agnes is still asleep. You don't wake her. She doesn't start until 7. Clara is dressed faster than you expected, and she looks at you with an expression that's somewhere between uncertainty and determination, which is the expression she wears approximately 16 hours a day. "Ready?" you say. She nods. You open the door, and the smell of the boarding house hits you. Every boarding house has its own smell. Mrs. Kessler's is cabbage from the kitchen on the first floor, coal smoke from the stove in the parlour, damp wool from the coats hung in the hallway, and something else underneath all of that, something organic and human, the smell of 12 women and 2 men. The male boarders are on the 3rd floor, which is a firm boundary. Living in closer proximity then is quite comfortable. You've stopped noticing it most of the time. You only notice it when you come in from outside, or when someone opens a window and cold air temporarily replaces it. The stairs creak. The first 3 stairs always creak. The 5th stair always creaks, and the landing always creaks. You know where to step to minimize the sound. Clara doesn't yet, and follows you too closely and creaks on all of them. The kitchen is already warm. Mrs. Kessler is a Bavarian woman of 60 who's been running boarding houses in Philadelphia since her husband died in 1851. She is stout, efficient, and entirely without sentimentality about the nature of urban poverty, which she does not consider pitiable, only practical. She feeds her boarders adequately, keeps the house clean by the standards of the neighbourhood, and charges a fair price without apology. She doesn't ask about your family, your past, your prospects, or your health, unless the last of these threatens to become a problem for the other tenants. She's looking at you now with the expression that means she is thinking about your health. You have the cough before you're through the kitchen door. Not a bad one. 3 coughs, controlled, over quickly. But Mrs. Kessler's eyes track it the way a cat tracks a mouse. "Porridge is on the stove," she says. "Eat before you go out. It's already gone cold twice this morning." You eat. The porridge is thick and hot and flavoured with a little salt. Not much else. There's no sugar, and the cream is thin. But it's warm. And warmth is what you need right now, more than flavour. You eat standing at the counter because the kitchen table is full of other women eating before their shifts. 7 women in the kitchen, ranging from Bridget Malone, who is 16 and works in the match factory, to Mrs. Walsh, who is 53 and does alterations for a tailor on Chestnut Street. They're at various stages of eating and dressing and preparing themselves for the day. The conversation is in fragments, as morning conversations always are. Somebody asking about somebody's sister, somebody else asking if anyone has seen her other boot, Bridget Malone complaining about the smell of phosphorus that's gotten into her hair again. The match factory. You know about the match factory. Everyone in this neighbourhood knows about the match factory on Arch Street, where girls like Bridget Malone stand at long tables dipping matchsticks into white phosphorus compound all day. The phosphorus smell doesn't wash out of their clothes. It glows sometimes faintly in the dark, which is a detail that's impressive until you understand what it means. That they're carrying phosphorus compounds home with them in their skin and hair and lungs, and there's something else about the match factory. Something the girls call phossy jaw. A swelling in the jaw and gums that starts slowly then progresses, the jawbone beginning to rot from the inside, the tissue dying, the bone going soft and discoloured. In the dark, they say, the infected jaws glow green. The same green glow as the phosphorus compounds. Bridget Malone is 16 and has worked at the match factory for 2 years, and her jaw looks fine right now. You hope it stays that way. You're not optimistic. You finish your porridge. You rinse the bowl in the wash basin by the back door. Mary, Mrs. Kessler says, not looking up from where she's cutting bread. Come see me this evening. It's not a question. You say nothing. You take your shawl from the hook by the door and follow Clara out into the street. Lombard Street in November at 5:30 in the morning. The city is already awake. Philadelphia is always already awake. It wakes itself up in stages, like a machine warming up. First the bakers, then the delivery wagons, then the factory workers, then everyone else, in a cascade that means the city never quite stops and never quite reaches full noise until about 8 in the morning, when it tips from waking up into fully operational. Right now, in this in-between time, the street sounds like cartwheels on cobblestones 2 blocks over, someone's horse objecting to something, a baby crying in one of the row houses across the street, a church bell marking the half hour from St. John the Evangelist on 13th Street. And underneath all of that, underneath everything, the low, constant mechanical hum of the industrial city breathing. You can hear a mill from here, not see it. The row houses block the view, but hear it. The rhythmic thud and hiss of steam-powered machinery operating continuously. Because the machines don't stop for breakfast. The machines don't stop for anything. The machines run as long as the coal holds out and someone is there to feed them. The cold is sharp and immediate. Your breath makes small clouds. Clara's eyes water. You get used to it, you tell her. You're not sure this is true. The street is narrow and the row houses press close on both sides. 3 stories of red brick with identical white stone lintels over identical windows. Most windows are dark. A few have the warm orange glow of candles or oil lamps. In one window, a woman's silhouette stands motionless looking out. You can't tell if she's watching the street or just standing in the only warm spot in her room. You walk. Clara keeps pace beside you. You cut south on 11th, then west on South Street, where the city gets wider and louder by degrees. The delivery wagons are out here, making their morning rounds. Milk wagons from the dairies on the northern edge of the city, bread wagons from the German bakeries on Passyunk, coal wagons from the yards by the river. The horses' hooves ring on the cobblestones, and their breath steams in the cold air, and when you pass close enough, you get a warm gust of animal smell that's almost welcome. There are other women walking this route. You know some of them by sight, a few by name. They're all moving in the same direction, all dressed more or less the way you're dressed, all with the same set expression that means, I am going to work and I would rather not think about this too much. This is the city's morning labour migration. Every morning, in every neighbourhood, in every industrial city in America right now, the same stream of women in wool shawls and working boots moving through the cold toward factories and laundries and workshops and other people's houses, moving toward whatever combination of necessity and inadequacy passes for an economy in 1875. The Metropolitan Steam Laundry occupies a building on South Street between 8th and 9th. It's not the largest laundry in Philadelphia. The ones along the Schuylkill are bigger, but it processes the linens for 6 hotels, 2 hospitals, 4 restaurants, and more individual household accounts than you've ever tried to count. What this means, practically, is that there's always work. What it also means is that the work never ends. You push through the wooden door, heavy, swollen with moisture. It requires a particular shoulder into it technique, and the heat hits you before you're all the way through. This is the paradox of working in a steam laundry in November. You spend the morning freezing on the way to work and then spend the next 12 hours in a building that runs somewhere between 75 and 90 degrees, depending on how many of the copper boilers are running and whether anyone's managed to get the ventilation windows open. The transition between outside and inside is violent enough to make your eyes water and your skin prickle. You've learned to pause just inside the door, just for a moment, and let your body catch up with the change. Clara does not know to pause. She walks in and immediately looks disoriented, which she probably is. The laundry is a large open room, maybe 80 feet by 40, with a low ceiling that concentrates the steam. Along the left wall, the boilers, 4 of them, copper tanks the size of small carriages, sitting over gas burners, roaring faintly. Along the right wall, the wringing machines and pressing tables. Down the centre, the sorting tables and the tubs, long wooden troughs mounted on legs, filled with hot water and lye soap, where most of the actual work happens. The smell is hot water and lye and something underneath that. The accumulated smell of laundry from the hotels and restaurants, which includes food stains and grease and occasionally things you'd rather not identify too closely. The clean smell of fresh linens and the industrial smell of the machinery itself, oil and hot metal and steam. On a full day, 45 women work in this room. On Monday, wash day for most of the hotel accounts, it can be closer to 60. This is Tuesday, which means the Monday linens came in last night and are sitting in sorting piles near the door waiting. You tie on your apron. You take your place at the tub. The water in the tub is already hot. This is the work. A piece of linen goes into the tub, into the hot soapy water. You work it with your hands, agitating it, scrubbing it, working the fabric against itself to loosen whatever the hotel guests have left in the sheets. You do this until the water turns grey and the linen looks clean. Then the linen goes to the wringing machine, then to the rinse tub, then to the mangle for pressing, then to the drying racks, then folded and stacked for delivery. A skilled laundress can do this in a rhythm. It becomes almost meditative when you're in it. Almost. The water is hot enough that your hands sting for the first few minutes and then go numb, which is its own kind of relief. Your hands go into the water. The sting is immediate. Worse than usual today, because the cuts along your knuckles, which have been healing in the cold and not healing fast enough, open in the hot water like they always do. You feel the sting. You keep moving. This is also a discipline. The other women are arriving around you, filling their stations, the room growing louder as 40-something pairs of hands go to work on 40-something tubs. The sound is layered and overlapping, the slosh of water, the rhythmic scrubbing, the occasional metal thud from the ringing machines, the hiss of steam, the conversations of women who've been doing this long enough to work and talk simultaneously. Margaret Howe is at the tub to your left. She's 41 and has worked at this laundry since it opened in 1869. She's short and wide-shouldered and has forearms that are visibly stronger than most men's, built by 6 years of exactly this motion. She's the kind of person who doesn't waste words, but makes each one count. She looks at you. Then she looks at your hands. Put some lard on those tonight, she says. Before. They split open worse. I know, you say. You're not doing it, or they wouldn't look like that. She's right. You haven't been doing it. The laird is in your room, in the wooden crate under the bed, and by the time you get home in the evening your hands are so tired that the thought of anything requiring further effort is almost beyond you. This is the logic of exhaustion. You know the things that would help. You frequently don't do them because doing them takes something you don't have left. I'll do it tonight, you say. Margaret Howe makes a sound that means she'll believe it when she sees it. You keep working. Half an hour in, the cough starts. Not badly, not at first. A tickle in the back of your throat that you clear once, twice. That settles briefly and then returns. You know this pattern. You've known it for 6 weeks. The steam in the laundry helps it, actually. Wet air is better than dry. But the hot water vapour and the lye both irritate something, and by mid-morning it's usually worse than when you started. You cough into your shoulder when you can, into your apron. You keep your hands in the water. The woman across the tub from you, Hannelore Brown, German, 35, doesn't speak much English but communicates comprehensively through expression. Watches you with an expression that is something between sympathy and specific anxiety. The specific anxiety of a woman who shares a workspace with someone coughing and knows how things spread in a room like this. You want to tell her it's not contagious. You don't actually know if this is true. You don't know what you have. You only know that you have it, and it hasn't gotten better in 6 weeks, despite the fact that you've been waiting for it to get better in 6 weeks. The morning goes on. The tubs fill and drain and fill again. Your hands go in and out of the water. The steam rises. Your back begins to ache in the specific way it always aches by mid-morning, the muscles across your lower back, complaining about a posture they never fully accept. You've tried adjusting your position at the tub. There's no position that's comfortable. There's only less uncomfortable. At 8 o'clock, Mr. Hartman makes his rounds. Mr. Hartman is the floor supervisor. He's 43, German-born, like about a third of the workforce, with a moustache he's invested considerable energy in maintaining, and an expression that suggests he finds the women under supervision collectively disappointing. He walks the floor twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon, ostensibly checking quality, actually checking whether anyone is moving too slowly or talking too much, or showing any sign of insufficient dedication to the laundering of hotel linen. He stops at your tub. He looks at the pile of finished work on your right. He looks at the pile of unfinished work on your left. Callahan, he says, you're behind. By 2 pieces, you say, I'll make it up before lunch. You'll make it up before 10. He moves on. You look at the pile on your left. You calculate. You pick up the pace. This is the arithmetic of the tub. A sheet takes approximately 4 minutes. A tablecloth takes 3. Napkins, if they're not too soiled, take 90 seconds each. Mr. Hartman's standards for caught up are calibrated to a pace that's slightly faster than comfortable and slightly slower than dangerous. He knows exactly where the line is. He's made his career at that line. You work faster. Your hands move. The water goes in and out of grey and back to grey. The morning wears on. At 10 you allow yourself a moment. Not a break. Breaks are at noon, 15 minutes for lunch, and again at 3 for 10 minutes. What you allow yourself is a pause between pieces, maybe 30 seconds, to straighten your back and breathe and let your hands hang over the tub. Your hands are red from wrist to knuckle. The cuts on your right hand have the faint pinkish bleed of cuts that have been under water for hours. The skin between your fingers is white and wrinkled in the way that skin wrinkles when it's wet long enough. When you flex your fingers, you can feel the tightness where the tendons have been working continuously since 5:30. You flex, you breathe, you cough once, quietly, into your shoulder. Mary, Margaret Howe, not looking up from her own tub. How long have you had that cough? It's not quite a question. Few weeks, you say. How many weeks? 6, you say, because there's no point lying to Margaret Howe. Silence for a moment. The sound of water and work. You should go to the dispensary, she says. I know, you say. You've said that before. You have. The Philadelphia dispensary is on Chestnut Street. It's free, or near enough. It asks for a small donation that most people give because they're embarrassed not to, but nothing is turned away for inability to pay. It's there specifically for women like you. You know this. You've walked past it, you haven't gone. The reason you haven't gone is not a single reason. It's a compound of several reasons that stack on each other. First, going to the dispensary means time. The dispensary opens at 9 in the morning. You work until 7 in the evening. On Sundays, your only full day off. It's closed. You could go on a Saturday afternoon, the half day when the laundry closes at 2. But Saturday afternoons are when you do your own washing, write letters home, try to sleep. Second, going to the dispensary means being examined. Being examined means being a body rather than a person, means having a man, a doctor, invariably a man, make decisions about you based on his assessment of your body and your situation. You've heard how it goes. You've heard it from women who've been. The doctor will ask questions about your habits. He may ask about your moral character, which is a question that means something specific and demeaning. He may decide, based on your address and your occupation and the way you're dressed, that your problem is overwork and the solution is rest, which would be excellent advice if rest was something you were able to take. Third, the cough might not be what you think it is. As long as you haven't gone to the dispensary, you haven't been told what it is. And as long as you haven't been told what it is, there are still several things it could be. Most of them not serious. A chest cold that's taking a long time to clear. Irritation from the lie. The cold smoke and damp air of November. Some of them more serious. You're 22 years old. You're not ready to be told the serious ones. Saturday, you say to Margaret Howe. I'll go Saturday. She makes the sound again, the one that means she'll believe it when she sees it. Lunch is 15 minutes at noon. You eat a roll you bought from the baker's cart on your way in this morning. It was fresh then. It's less fresh now. Slightly dense and a little cold from sitting in your apron pocket, and a piece of hard cheese from the package you brought from the boarding house. You eat standing in the alley behind the laundry, where the other women go for the 15 minutes they're allowed outside. It's cold in the alley, but it's cold in a clean way. The air cold and still and without the chemical overlay of the inside. There are maybe 15 women out here. They're talking in the small clusters that form between people who work alongside each other for 12 hours a day. Not friends exactly, not all of them, but something shaped by proximity and shared duration that's close enough. You're with Clara, who is still getting used to everything, and Nora Flanagan, who has been at the laundry for 3 years and knows everything worth knowing. Nora Flanagan is 27 and originally from County Clare, Ireland, meaning she came over during one of the post-famine waves of emigration that have been filling up South Philadelphia since the 1850s. She has red hair that goes in approximately 7 directions out of her work bun by the end of a shift, and a sharp, precise way of talking that means she gets to the point immediately and doesn't apologise for it. Mrs. Kessler wants to talk to you, Nora says. She mentioned, you say. It's about the cough. Not a question. Probably. She's going to say what she said to Kathleen Dempsey. You know what she said to Kathleen Dempsey? Kathleen Dempsey had a cough too 3 years ago, and Mrs. Kessler told her she needed to either get a certificate from a doctor saying she wasn't contagious or find alternative accommodations, because Mrs. Kessler had 12 other boarders and couldn't afford for them to get sick. Kathleen Dempsey couldn't afford a doctor. She moved to a different boarding house on Fitzwater Street that was cheaper and less clean and had fewer rules about the number of people per room. You don't know what happened to Kathleen Dempsey after that. She's not wrong, Nora says. It's not cruel when she says it, it's just accurate. She's got to think about the others. I know, you say. You need to go to the dispensary. I know. Before Saturday. She looks at you the way Margaret Howe looked at you, which is the look of someone who has watched other women make the decision to wait and seen where that decision goes. The dispensary on Chestnut, or the German hospital on Girard if you want to try your luck there, they take women without recommendation sometimes, or you go to the almshouse. She says the last one the way you say the word for something you don't want to say. The almshouse. Blockley. The Philadelphia Hospital and Almshouse on the west bank of the Schuylkill, in a neighbourhood that's technically the city, but feels like the edge of somewhere else, where you go when there's nowhere else to go, where the city puts its poor and its sick and its old and its mad when it doesn't know what else to do with them. It won't come to that, you say. Nora's expression doesn't change. The 15 minutes end. You go back inside. The afternoon is harder than the morning. This is always true. The afternoon is harder. By 1 o'clock, your back has gone from aching to a specific burning complaint in the muscles on either side of your spine. By 2 o'clock, your feet, which has been standing on stone floors since 5:30, are complaining in a different but equally insistent way. By 3 o'clock, during the 10-minute break, you sit on an upturned bucket in the alley and feel your body trying to tell you something you don't have time to hear. The cough is worse in the afternoon. The steam builds up in the room as the day goes on, which should help but doesn't, because by afternoon the steam carries less warmth and more lye, and the lye catches in your throat and triggers what feels like an independent response. Your body trying to expel something that isn't there to be expelled. You cough into your shoulder. You work. The afternoon brings the hotel accounts. The Monday linens from the Continental Hotel on Chestnut Street. The finest hotel in Philadelphia, possibly in America. 6 stories of French Renaissance architecture that opened in 1860. And has been hosting presidents and foreign dignitaries, and anyone rich enough to afford $12 a night ever since. Its linens are Egyptian cotton, 300 count, the finest you've ever touched. Beautiful things. They come to this laundry in bundles, handled by men in delivery livery who don't make eye contact with the women who sort and wash and press them. You wash them with the same hot water and lye soap you use on everything else. This is a detail you think about sometimes. The gap between the Continental Hotel's actual existence, the marble floors, the gas chandeliers, the dining room where the table linen is changed between courses, and these linens in this tub being scrubbed by your cracked hands in this building on South Street. The people who sleep in Continental Hotel beds probably never think about where their sheets go. They sleep in something white and crisp and clean, and it reappears white and crisp and clean the next day, having travelled 6 blocks and back in the hands of women whose names they don't know. You think about the Continental Hotel in another way too. The Continental Hotel has a physician on staff, Dr. Somebody from the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, who is available to guests 24 hours a day for a fee that would represent 2 weeks of your wages. Dr. Somebody is the kind of doctor who makes house calls to brownstone townhouses on Rittenhouse Square and treats the ailments of women who have the time and money and social standing to be treated like patients rather than problems. You have, at this point in your life, seen a doctor 3 times. Once when you broke your wrist falling out of a tree at age 9. Once when you had scarlet fever at 13. Once when a boiler accident at the laundry 2 years ago burned your arm badly enough that Mr. Hartman sent 3 women to the hospital, not out of concern for them, but because he didn't want the liability of untreated injuries on the floor. Each time, it was the same type of encounter. Brief, transactional, your body treated as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. You were told what was wrong, told what to do about it, and sent on your way. You are aware that other women of a different class in different circumstances, have a different relationship with medicine. They have doctors they see regularly, doctors who know their names and their histories, doctors who treat them with something approximating the deference due to a person. You're aware of this the way you're aware of the Continental Hotel, as a fact about the world, as a specific distance between where you are and where other people are. By 5 o'clock, the light through the high windows has faded to the particular grey-blue of Philadelphia in November. Gas lamps are lit in the laundry, turning the steam yellow, making the room feel warmer than it is. You've washed 14 sheets, 22 pillowcases, 11 tablecloths, 34 napkins, and assorted smaller items. This is a Tuesday's worth of work. This is what your $4.50 buys. Your hands are beyond their earlier red. They've moved into a darker soreness that's less sensation and more awareness. You know they hurt. You can feel it when you press them against something. But the feeling has that quality of long-duration pain, where the edges get blurry. The cuts on your knuckles have stopped bleeding and dried in the water. The skin on your palms has that deep, wet, dried texture that takes a full night to partially recover from and a full day to come back. You wring your apron over the empty tub. You untie it. You roll down your sleeves. The cough comes then, harder than it's been all day. You're bent over the tub with your hands on the rim and the coughing bends you. Further, your body doing something involuntary, trying to clear something deep in your chest. 5, 6, 7, 8 coughs that go past the back of your throat into something deeper and rawer. When it stops, you're breathing harder than you should be from coughing. Margaret Howe has her hand on your back briefly. She doesn't say anything. She takes her hand away. Saturday, you say, before she can say it again. The walk back to the boarding house is quieter than the walk to work. This is always true. The morning walk is a walk towards something, which has a different quality than the walk away. The evening walk is a walk toward home, which should feel like relief, and does, somewhat, except that home is also cold and small and the place where Mrs. Kessler wants to talk to you. The streets are darker now. The lamplighters have been through. You can see the gas lamps burning at intervals on South Street, their light warm and insufficient, making yellow pools on the cobblestones, but not much affecting the darkness between them. The delivery wagons have been replaced by different traffic, men coming out of the factories and mills, some of them heading for the saloons that appear on alternating corners in this neighbourhood, some of them heading home, some of them heading for both in that order. Clara walks beside you. She has the look of someone who has done something extremely difficult and is still processing that it was real. Does it get easier, she says, which is what she says every evening. You think about this honestly. Some parts do, you say. Your back stops hurting the same way after about 3 months. Your hands get tougher. You stop noticing the steam. What doesn't get easier? You think about this too. The length, you say finally. It's still 12 hours. That doesn't change. She nods, taking this in. On 11th Street, you pass the German pharmacy. It's still open, the window lit amber, the handwritten signs in German and English for various remedies. You've looked in this window before. You slow down now and look again. There are throat lozenges. You can see them in the glass case, and various patent medicines for chest complaints, which is the current euphemism for anything from a cold to consumption. There are bottles of cod liver oil and syrup of wild cherry, and Dr. Whoever's compound for female debility, which is a category of medicine that addresses everything women are allowed to publicly complain about. You have, in your coin purse, enough money to buy 1 or 2 of these things. You know the lozenges won't cure whatever you have. You also know that doing nothing has been your strategy for 6 weeks and it hasn't worked. You push open the pharmacy door. The pharmacist, Mr. Lehman, you've seen him before, a thin man with small spectacles, looks up from behind the counter with the expression of someone calculating whether you're a paying customer or a browser. The throat lozenges, you say. And do you have anything for a chest cough? 6 weeks? He looks at you. He does the calculation. How bad is it? Persistent. Worse in the evenings. Any blood? You go still. No, you say. Because there hasn't been. Not yet. He gets you the lozenges and a small bottle of Dr. Jane's expectorant, which is a brown liquid that smells aggressively medicinal and is supposedly good for chest conditions. The combined cost is 35 cents, which is not nothing. If it doesn't improve in 2 weeks, he says, see a doctor. You nod. You take the small paper bag. You go back out into the cold. You're already 2 weeks past when you should have seen a doctor. The boarding house smells of supper, cabbage and something else, possibly salt pork, and the warmth of the kitchen hits you with the same force as the laundry heat, except this warmth is welcome in a way the laundry's isn't. Mrs. Kessler is waiting, not dramatically. She's just standing near the foot of the stairs when you come in the way. That suggests she's been aware of your arrival but doesn't want to look like she was waiting. She's a practical woman, Mrs. Kessler. She doesn't do dramatic. Come into the parlour, she says. The parlour is the front room on the ground floor, the respectable room, the room with actual furniture, a settee and 2 chairs and a small table with a lamp on it. It smells of the beeswax Mrs. Kessler polishes the furniture with. It's used for conversations of consequence. You sit in one of the chairs. Mrs. Kessler sits across from you with the brisk posture of someone conducting a necessary business. The cough, she says. Yes, you say. How long? 6 weeks. Her expression doesn't change, but something in it settles, the way a face settles when it's confirmed something it was already thinking. "Mary," she says, not unkindly, "I have 12 other boarders in this house." "I know." "I'm not saying you're contagious. I don't know what you have. That's precisely the problem." "I know, and it's not personal. You've been an excellent tenant. You pay on time, you're clean, you don't bring trouble. You know what comes next. But I can't have a woman with a persistent chest cough sharing a room with 2 other boarders for another 6 weeks while she decides whether to see a doctor." The sentence is built very carefully. It's not a threat. It's a statement of conditions. Mrs. Kessler is not cruel. She's also not running a charity. She has her own arithmetic to do. "Saturday, you say. I'll go to the dispensary on Saturday." "That's 3 days." "Yes. And if they find something," she pauses, "if it's something that requires you to stop working." "It won't come to that, you say." She looks at you with the eyes of a woman who's been running boarding houses for 24 years and has seen this conversation go many ways. "I hope you're right," she says, "but if it does, I'll need the room." There it is. Not cruel, not unusual, just accurate. The boarding house is her income. The 12 boarders are her income. One boarder who stops working and can't pay the rent is a problem she can't sustain. "Saturday, you say again." She nods once, stands. Supper's ready. The supper table is all 12 women tonight. You eat cabbage soup with salt pork and a thick slice of bread and butter. The food is plain but sufficient, and the table is warm and loud enough to require effort at conversation, which you appreciate because it means you don't have to think. The women talk about the day, about money, about each other's families, about the news. The big news in Philadelphia right now is the Centennial exhibition, the country's 100th birthday party, scheduled for the spring of 1876, right here at Fairmount Park. The largest international exposition ever held in America. Hundreds of buildings being constructed on the park grounds, countries from all over the world sending exhibits. The president will attend the opening. Every newspaper in the city talks about almost nothing else. "My brother says they'll need 1,000 extra workers for the construction," says Bridget Malone, who has an opinion about everything. He's applied to 3 of the contractors. "There's worker women too," says one of the upstairs boarders. "Eliza something. You don't know her well. Some of the restaurants along the park are hiring already. My cousin got taken on at one." "Restaurant work," says Nora Flanagan, who is at the other end of the table but has the carrying voice of someone who grew up outdoors, "is good in spring, but by summer you're run ragged and they're already training the next set of girls to replace you." "Better than the laundry," says someone else, light-hearted, not cruel. Laughter around the table. You eat your bread. You think about the Centennial exhibition. Fairmount Park is 2 miles north of here. You've been there. It's a public park, free to enter, and on Sunday afternoons in the summer it fills up with the working families of Philadelphia looking for somewhere green to be. You've walked along the Squirrelkill there. You've seen the picnics and the children running and the band concerts that happen on weekend afternoons. In the spring, those same grounds will hold something the newspapers are calling the greatest spectacle in American history. A machine hall 3 stories tall housing the largest steam engine ever built. A women's building, built by women, designed by women, celebrating women's work. Exhibitions from 37 countries. The telephone if Alexander Graham Bell's experimental device works as advertised. The typewriter, the sleeping car, the things of tomorrow, And for the women who will cook and clean and launder in the shadow of all this celebration of American progress, the daily work will go on. You cough into your napkin, not badly, twice. Across the table, Clara is watching you with those wide Lancaster eyes. You give her a small nod that means, I know, Saturday, after supper. You do what you promised Margaret Howe. In your room, with Agnes asleep already, and Clara reading a letter from home by candlelight, you take the small tin of lard from the wooden crate under your bed, and you do, methodically and without pleasure, what you should have been doing for weeks. The lard is cold and thick and resists spreading. You work it in carefully between your fingers, along the cracks, over the raw patches on your palms. The feeling is unpleasant, greasy and a little nauseating. But you keep going, working the fat into the skin with the same methodical motion you use on the laundry sheets. This is what passes for medical care at your level. Lard, when you remember to use it. Throat lozenges from the pharmacist. Patent medicines in brown bottles. Home remedies passed between women who know that professional medicine is for them a last resort rather than a regular resource. You treat yourself the way the women around you treat themselves, practically, improvisationally, with what's available and affordable, and with the long-established understanding that your body is a working tool and the goal is to keep it functional rather than to treat it as something precious. The dispensary exists. There are 3 hospitals in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Hospital, founded in 1751, one of the oldest in America, Jefferson Medical College Hospital, the German hospital. There is technically access to medicine for people without money. Technically. In practice, the access is shaped by a series of conditions, which doctor you see. Whether you're considered a deserving case, working poor rather than what the doctors and charity organisers call the undeserving poor, a category that includes anyone whose poverty is attributed to moral failing. Whether you present your case correctly, with the right combination of deference and detail, in a way that produces sympathy rather than skepticism. Whether you have the time to attend the dispensary during its operating hours. Whether you can afford to follow whatever advice is given. And then there's the specific condition of being a woman. Medicine in 1875 is, in ways that will later seem astonishing and shouldn't seem surprising, built around the male body as default. The diseases that get studied most carefully, the treatments that get refined with the most precision, the diagnostic categories that are most developed, these are built around men. Not because the men who built them were deliberately malicious, but because the men who built them studied the bodies most available to them, which were primarily male bodies. Medical students practiced on male cadavers. Hospital wards were divided, and the resources flowed in predictable directions. Women are treated for women's complaints. Everything else is adaptation. And women who are poor and working and present to a dispensary or hospital with a chest complaint are subject to a specific set of assumptions. They live in crowded conditions. True. They're likely exposed to multiple people. They may be, the assumption goes unspoken but present, morally compromised in ways that affect their health. They probably just need rest and better food. You finish with the lard. Your hands look worse before they look better. Greasy and reddened and deeply unglamorous. You wipe off the excess with a rag. You take the Dr. Jane's expectorant, a spoonful. It tastes the way it smells, which is like something scraped off the inside of a pine tree soaked in alcohol. You swallow it. You suppress the urge to cough it back up. You blow out your candle. You lie down. Outside, the city is not quiet. It's never quiet. But it's moved into its nighttime version of itself. The factory hum lower. The street noise changed from the daytime mix to the evening mix. Taverns, voices, the occasional shout, a horse somewhere nearby. Somewhere on Lombard Street, a baby is still crying, or possibly a different baby from the one this morning. You think about Saturday, the dispensary on Chestnut Street, the conversation you'll have to have, the questions you'll have to answer, the assessment you'll receive. You think about what happens if the assessment is bad. You've been trying not to think about it for 6 weeks. The trying not to think is itself getting exhausting. It requires a specific ongoing effort, a constant redirection, a daily decision to keep your attention on what's right in front of you. The tub, the water, the linen, the walk home, the supper, and not on the thing underneath it that you're keeping your eyes carefully away from. 6 weeks is a long time to have a cough. You know what the options are. You know this from women you've known, from things you've overheard, from the general knowledge that moves through boarding houses and laundries about what can happen to women in your situation. If it's a chest cold, it clears up. Eventually. If it's something else. The thing that takes people in this city. Every winter, the thing that empties beds in boarding houses and pews in churches and stations at laundry tubs. Well, if it's that, then the dispensary will refer you to Pennsylvania Hospital, which will admit you if they have a bed and you're deemed a suitable case. You'll stop working. You'll stop paying rent. Mrs. Kessler will need the room. And after the hospital, if the hospital doesn't hold you, and it often doesn't, hospitals are not long-term care facilities. Hospitals are for acute treatment, and then you go. After that, there's Blockley. Blockley. You've never been to Blockley. You've never been close to it. But it's there the way certain things are there, like the Delaware River and the noise of the mills and the fact of winter. A permanent feature of the landscape that you navigate around. The place where the city's poor go when the other options run out. You close your eyes. The lard is doing something very slightly for your hands. You can feel the deep ache in them less sharply than an hour ago. Small mercies. You sleep. Wednesday is the same as Tuesday, mostly. The same cold morning walk, the same hot room, the same tubs and the same water and the same motion. The cough is possibly slightly better, or possibly you've just gotten better at managing it. Hard to tell the difference. But Wednesday has a difference. Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Hartman stops at your tub again. This time he doesn't look at the pile of finished work. He looks at you. You were absent 2 Saturdays ago, he says. I was sick, you say. I sent word. You were absent the Saturday before that as well. That wasn't illness. That was a family matter. Your mother had been unwell and you went to Germantown on a Saturday afternoon, missing the last 2 hours of work. You told Mr. Hartman it was illness then too, because family matter doesn't get you any more tolerance than illness. I'll note, Mr. Hartman says, that we're in November. What he means is November is when the hotel accounts pick up, the winter season, the dinner parties and balls and functions that generate tablecloths and napkins in volumes that require full staffing. November is not the time to be unreliable. What he also means, though he doesn't say it, is that there are women who want your spot at the tub. There are always women who want your spot at the tub. The laundry employs steadily through the winter, and then takes on additional women in high volume in the spring before the Centennial exhibition opens. But right now in November the standing positions are filled, and the waiting list is several names long. I won't be absent again, you say. He holds your gaze for a moment, then moves on. Margaret Howe from the next tub doesn't turn her head. Get to the dispensary, she says, quietly enough that he won't hear. Saturday, you say. Friday, she says. After closing, 4 o'clock. They take walk-ins until 5. You hadn't known this. You didn't know they stayed open. Late on Fridays. How do you know that, you say? She pauses. Because I took myself there once, she says. Years ago. And doesn't say anything more about it. Thursday. Thursday brings something different. Thursday, the sky outside the laundry windows, visible in the high transom panes when you look up from the tub, turns from grey to white and then, by mid-morning, to the specific white of something about to happen. It snows for the first time in November. Not a heavy snow. A Philadelphia November snow, which is more intention than substance. Fat, soft flakes that melt when they hit the cobblestones, but accumulate on windowsills and roof edges, and the tops of delivery wagons, giving the city a brief, false cleanliness. You see it through the transoms, the white light coming in differently, the way light comes in differently when there's snow outside. It makes you think of Germantown, your mother's kitchen, the smell of the bread she made on cold days, the warmth of the kitchen where the whole family gathered because it was the warmest room in the house, your sisters' voices, the sound of your father coming up the back steps after the mill, the specific heavy footfall of a man who's been working machinery all day. You haven't been to Germantown in 3 months. You've been saving the streetcar fare. You think about writing a letter this weekend. You think about your mother knowing you have a cough. The thought makes something in your chest tighten that isn't the cough. In the afternoon of Thursday, something happens that you don't think will matter, and then does. A new delivery comes in around 2 o'clock. Not hotel linens. Something else. A large covered wagon from the direction of West Philadelphia, driven by a man in the coveralls of a hospital employee. The bundles he brings in are marked with the name of the Pennsylvania hospital. You've seen hospital linens before. They come in less often than the hotel accounts. Hospitals prefer to do their own. Laundry generally, but occasionally when their capacity is overwhelmed. Hospital linens are different from hotel linens. They carry things hotel linens don't. Mr. Hartman takes the delivery and directs it to the boiling vats at the far end of the room, the vats reserved for heavily soiled items that need extra heat. He doesn't explain what the linens are from. He doesn't need to. The women who work the boiling vats do their job without comment, because they've done this before. You're not working the boiling vats today. You're at your usual tub, but you're close enough to see, as the bundles are opened, that these are from the hospital's sick wards. You can tell from the staining, from the smell underneath the chemical smell of however the hospital tried to pre-treat them, from the particular worn-thin quality of the fabric, hospital-grade cotton, washed hundreds of times, more grey than white now. Someone slept in these. Someone was sick in these. You keep working. You keep your eyes on your own tub. You breathe through your mouth, but you think for the rest of the afternoon about the woman who slept in those sheets. Friday. Friday morning is grey again. The brief beauty of the snow already gone except for dirty grey mounds along the curb where the street cleaners haven't been. Your breath makes clouds. Clara is getting faster in the mornings, which is a mercy. You no longer have to wait for her on the stairs. At the laundry, you work your morning tubs without incident. The cough is its usual self, worse when you first arrive, settling to a persistent background condition through the middle of the day, worse again in the afternoon when the lie builds up. At noon, you tell Nora Flanagan that you're going to the dispensary after closing. She looks at you for a moment with those sharp, accurate eyes. "Do you want company?" she says. You're surprised. Nora Flanagan is not a person who offers things she doesn't mean. No, you say after a moment, but thank you. She nods. Come by the boarding house tonight and tell me what they said. If it's nothing, there won't be much to tell. Then it won't take long, she says, and goes back to her lunch. At 4 on Friday afternoon, you push open the door of the Philadelphia dispensary on Chestnut Street. The building is narrow and 3 stories tall, squeezed between a bookshop and a bootmaker, one of those Philadelphia buildings that manages to look both respectable and slightly apologetic about its location. Inside, a waiting room with wooden benches, the smell of carbolic acid, and something floral trying to counteract the carbolic acid, a clerk behind a wooden desk. The waiting room has 8 women in it already. This is important. You'd expected somehow to be more alone here, as if illness was an individual experience rather than a collective one. But of course it isn't. The room is full of women who have also waited too long and come on a Friday afternoon because it was the only time they could, and they're sitting with the particular posture of people who are trying to take up as little space as possible while waiting to be assessed. You take your place on a bench. The clerk takes your name, asks your address, your occupation, your landlady's name, writes it all in a ledger. You wait. The other women don't talk much, but you watch them. The woman to your left is older, 50, maybe older, with a hand wrapped in a cloth bandage that she holds carefully in her lap. A burn, probably, or a wound that's gotten infected. Something with a hand. She sits very still and looks at the floor. The woman across from you is young, younger than you, maybe 18. She has a look about her, the particular look of someone who's here about something she hasn't told anyone about, that is concentrated and internal and goes carefully around eye contact. She has a shawl pulled close around her. You don't speculate. Everyone in this room is in enough difficulty without additional speculation. The wait is 40 minutes, which is not bad. Dispensaries are generally worse on Mondays. The doctor is young. This surprises you. Young and tired, in a white coat over a dark suit, with ink on his fingers and the manner of someone who is somewhere between his 4th and 7th year of medical training. Capable, but still occasionally audible in the slight checking of himself as he handles things. The quick referencing of something inside his head. His name is Dr. Whitfield. He tells you this. He shakes your hand briefly, which also surprises you. You didn't expect a handshake. The examination room is small and very white. White walls, white curtain on the window, white cloth on the examination table. It smells of the carbolic acid more strongly here, which you understand means it's been cleaned properly. He asks you to describe the cough. You describe it. 6 weeks. Worse in the evenings. Worse when the air is cold or there's chemical vapour in it. Productive, meaning it brings something up some mornings. No blood. He asks about your work. You tell him. He writes notes. His handwriting is fast and cramped. He asks you to remove your coat and shawl and unbutton the top of your dress enough for him to use his stethoscope. He does this with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who has done this several hundred times, and is aware that the request requires trust that he intends to justify. The stethoscope is cold against your skin. He listens. He moves it. He listens again. He asks you to breathe deeply, which triggers the cough, which he listens to, and then waits for to pass before asking you to breathe deeply again. He asks you to breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. He watches your chest. He takes your pulse. He looks at your hands, the redness, the cuts, the lie damage. He asks about those. Then he steps back. and makes more notes. You wait. "Miss Callahan," he says. You told him at the start that it was Miss... "The good news is that I don't hear anything in your chest that suggests a serious infection." You let out a breath. You didn't realize you'd been holding it. "The bad news, well, it's not exactly bad news, it's more of a strongly worded recommendation, is that your lungs are showing signs of irritation consistent with sustained exposure to chemical vapor." "The laundry," you say. The lie, specifically. "And probably the steam conditions. Your respiratory system has been working harder than it should for some time, and what started as possibly a simple winter cold has been prevented from healing properly because the irritation keeps happening every day." You look at him. "You need to stop working in the laundry," he says. Silence. "For how long?" you say. "Ideally several weeks. Enough for the irritation to clear." He pauses. "I understand that may not be practical. You want to say something that would convey the precise degree to which several weeks is not practical. You don't say it. "I can't stop working," you say instead. He nods in the way of someone who's expecting this and is prepared for it. "Then here's what I can offer. These..." He writes something on a prescription form. "Are for the cough. They'll suppress it enough to keep the irritation from spiraling. You should sleep with your window cracked. Even in the cold, the outside air is less harmful to you than the room air, and avoid as much chemical exposure as you can manage." He pauses. "And I want to see you again in 2 weeks. Not because I'm alarmed, but because if it hasn't improved, we should look further." "What would further mean?" you say. He looks at you with the clear eyes of someone deciding how honest to be. "If the irritation doesn't resolve," he says carefully, "we'd want to rule out other causes. Tuberculosis presents similarly in the early stages." There it is. The word you've been not thinking about for 6 weeks. "But," he says quickly, "I don't see signs of that today. The sounds in your chest are those of irritation, not infection. This is genuinely, as best I can determine today, consistent with chemical exposure rather than disease." "As best you can determine," you say. "Medicine is not," he says, a little apologetically, "always certain." You take the prescription. He writes something else on a separate card. "This is the address of the Pennsylvania Hospital Outpatient Clinic," he says, handing it to you. "If you can't afford the prescription..." "I can afford it," you say. It's not entirely true, but it's true enough. "Good." He stands, which means the consultation is over. "Miss Callahan, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, you say. Outside, Chestnut Street is fully dark now. Gas lamps burning, the after-work crowd moving on the pavement. Philadelphia going about its Friday evening. Shops still open. People moving in both directions with the purposeful randomness of a city navigating itself. You stand on the step of the dispensary for a moment. Breathing. Not tuberculosis. Probably not tuberculosis. Chemical irritation. Treatable. Possible to manage. The relief is so large and so physical that it takes you slightly off balance, the way relief does when you've been bracing against something for a long time, and the bracing suddenly has less to brace against. Your chest is still the same. Your hands are still the same. Your situation is exactly the same as it was when you walked in. But the thing you are keeping your eyes carefully away from is slightly smaller now. Enough smaller to breathe around. You start walking home. Chestnut Street at 5 on a Friday evening in November 1875. And here you should stop and look at where you are, because you're so rarely here in this particular part of the city that it deserves its attention. Chestnut Street is one of Philadelphia's grand streets. Not the grandest. That would be Broad Street, 2 blocks west. where the most expensive houses and the clubs and the Academy of Music sit. But Chestnut is the commercial heart, the street of banks and shops and the grand hotels, the street that foreigners are brought to see when they want to show them what Philadelphia looks like at its best. The Arcade, the old Chestnut Street Theatre District, is here. The banks with their Greek Revival columns sit back from the street like institutions of ancient authority. The department stores, Wanamaker's is 4 blocks from here, display their windows in the gaslight, the goods arranged to catch the eye of anyone with money to spend on them. You do not have money to spend here. You're not part of this street's intended audience, but you can look. And here's the thing about Philadelphia in the autumn of 1875 that a Philadelphian can feel, even if they can't articulate it. The city is on the edge of something. 1 year from now, less than actually, the Centennial exhibition will open at Fairmount Park. The country will be 100 years old. Philadelphia will be the center of the known world for 6 months. 37 nations will send their best work. 10 million people will come. The city is already changing for it. New hotels going up, streets being widened, the park grounds being transformed into something the newspapers call the 8th wonder of the world. And underneath that Centennial confidence, that American optimism about the next 100 years, the city is hard. The city is unequal in ways that are getting harder to ignore. The gap between Chestnut Street and Lombard Street is not a new gap, but it's a visible gap now. The reformers and the journalists are writing about it. The photographers are documenting it. You're not a reformer or a journalist. You're a woman walking home from the dispensary with a prescription for something that will help your cough. But you know both things at once. You know the grandeur and you know the gap. You live in the gap. Every morning you walk from the gap toward the grandeur, and every evening you walk back. This is, you think, the specific knowledge of being poor in a prosperous city, not ignorance of prosperity. You're surrounded by prosperity. You launder prosperity's sheets, but intimate knowledge of precisely how it doesn't include you. 2 blocks north, you can see the skeleton, the City Hall. Philadelphia is building a new City Hall, and it is, in 1875, one of the most ambitious construction projects in America. They started the foundation in 1872. It will not be finished until 1901, though nobody knows that yet. What they know is that the building will be the largest in America when complete, topped by a statue of William Penn at a height that will make it, briefly, the tallest occupied structure in the world. Right now, in November 1875, it's a skeleton of stone and scaffolding rising above Penn Square, the intersection at Broad and Market that Penn himself designated as the centre of his city 200 years ago. The scaffolding is everywhere. Wooden platforms and rope lines and men who work up there every day at heights that would make you physically ill. The stonework is rising, but slowly. It's been 3 years since they started, and they're maybe a quarter of the way up. When it's finished, this building you can see in skeleton. It will stand as a monument to the city that was built, among other things, by women scrubbing hotel linens in South Street steam laundries. No one will write that on the monument, but it will be true. You look at it for a moment, the way you always look at things that are big and ongoing and complicated to feel about. Then you turn south and walk home. Saturday morning, you sleep late, late being 8 o'clock, which is 2 hours past your usual waking time, which your body receives as something close to decadence. You lie in bed for a few minutes after you wake up, which is a luxury you allow yourself only on Sundays and the occasional Saturday when you've earned it. The cough this morning is slightly better. Maybe the Dr. Jane's. Maybe the knowledge that you went to the dispensary and it isn't the worst thing. Maybe both. The body is not entirely separate from the mind, which is something you know from experience, if not from any medical text. You dress. You eat Mrs. Kessler's Saturday breakfast. Eggs today. A real treat on Mrs. Kessler's part. You tell Mrs. Kessler what the doctor said. She listens. She nods. She asks what the prescription is. Something for the cough, and he said to sleep with the window cracked. In November, she says. He said the outside air is better for the lungs than the room air. She considers this with the expression she has for advice that's medically sound but practically difficult. I'll give you an extra blanket, she says. Don't freeze Clara. You nod. Mrs. Kessler, I want to thank you. She waves this off briskly in the German way. Don't thank me. Just get better. I'd rather have you than break in someone new. Saturday afternoon is yours. You do your washing. Your own, which takes an hour in the wash basin in your room. Your own things scrubbed and wrung and hung on the line in the backyard, using the skills of the laundry in miniature. You write a letter to your mother. You tell her you're well. This is not entirely true. You tell her the city is busy and work is steady. This is true. You tell her you've been to a doctor and everything is fine. This is approximately true. You fold the letter. You address it. You'll post it Monday. Then you do something you haven't done in several weeks. You go to Fairmount Park. Not the grounds where the Centennial is being built. Those are mostly closed to casual visitors right now, fenced off for construction. But the park itself, the old part along the Schuylkill, the wooded banks and the river path, is public and free and open. You take the streetcar north because the walk is too far and you've decided to spend the money. The car is crowded on Saturday afternoons with families going to the park for the same reason you are. Because the park is free and the air there is better than the air in the neighbourhoods, and some things you need for free. The river in November is cold and low, steel grey under a grey sky. The trees along the bank have lost their leaves. The park paths are soft with fallen leaves gone wet with November rain. The leaves brown and dark under your boots, making that particular sound of late autumn. Not the crunch of dry leaves, but the softer mulch sound of leaves past their season. You walk for an hour. The cold air, whatever Dr. Whitfield thinks of it as medicine, does something for you that has nothing to do with medicine. The specific quality of outside air in a park where it smells of river and decay and wet earth, rather than coal smoke and lye and 12 women's bodies. This is what the air is supposed to smell like, you think. This is what your lungs were designed for. You breathe deeply. The cough doesn't come. There are other women in the park walking the same river path, some with children, some alone or in pairs. A woman about your age with a baby in a carriage, the baby asleep despite everything. 2 older women in good coats, arm in arm, clearly here for the same reason as you. The air, the green, the distance from whatever they usually deal with. And on a bench near the river, a woman alone. You notice her because she's not moving, not walking, just sitting very still on the bench in the cold in a way that suggests she's been there a while. Her coat is thin for November, and her boots, you notice boots, being someone who thinks about boots, are worn through at the toe. She's maybe 35. She has a face that would have been pretty and still is, in a way that's fighting the evidence of difficulty. She's sitting with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the river. You slow down. There's a practice in this city among women in this neighbourhood of a very specific form of attentiveness, not interfering, not prying, but being present, being aware. Because you know from the math of your own life and the lives of the women around you exactly how quickly the arithmetic tips, exactly how close the line is between sitting on a bench in a park because you chose to and sitting on a bench in a park because you don't have anywhere else to be. You sit down on the other end of the bench. Cold today, you say. She looks at you. Something in her expression recalibrates. She was somewhere else in her head, and you've called her back. Yes, she says. Her accent is German, not heavy, but there. You sit for a moment in the particular silence of two strangers on a bench who have understood that they're both here for something similar. Do you live near here, you say? I did, she says. And then, after a pause, as if the pause decided something, I have to be out of my rooms by Monday. She stops, starts again. I was in service. I was ill and I wasn't able to work for 3 weeks and I'm no longer employed there. You understand this completely. Domestic service. Cook or housemaid, probably. In one of the Germantown or Chestnut Hill houses. Illness means absence, means replacement. And in domestic service, your accommodation comes with your position. No position, no room. Where will you go? You say. She's quiet. You can see her deciding whether to say it. A friend has a room. For now, and then. She pauses. I don't know. The people at St. Clement's Church, the Ladies' Aid. Have you tried the Woman's Union at 18th Street, you say? They sometimes have temporary rooms, and they can sometimes help with placement in new positions. She looks at you with an expression that's something between surprise and something else. The specific expression of someone who expected to be invisible and is briefly not. No, she says, I didn't know about that. You tell her what you know about the Woman's Union, which isn't much, but is more than nothing. You tell her about the German dispensary on Girard, which is free and specifically serves the German community. You tell her what the women in your boarding house have told you about the city's resources, such as they are, partial and inadequate and better than nothing. She listens. She takes a small piece of paper from her pocket and writes something down. Thank you, she says. I'm Mary Callahan, you say. Adele Schmidt, she says. You sit on the bench for another few minutes watching the river. Neither of you says anything else. It's enough somehow to have said what you said. Then you stand and she stands, and you walk in different directions. You think about Adele Schmidt on the walk back to the streetcar. You think about the distance between her situation and yours, which is not as large as the distance between yours and the women at the Continental Hotel, not as large as the distance between Lombard Street and Chestnut Street. But still a distance. You have a position. You have a landlady who gave you a warning rather than a dismissal. You have Nora Flanagan and Margaret Howe, and even Mr. Hartman, who is watching you but hasn't fired you yet. You think about the direction things move, not because you're given to dramatic thinking about your circumstances. You're not. You've trained yourself not to be, because dramatic thinking is expensive and produces nothing. But because you understand the direction. You've seen it. You've seen it in the women you know and the women you've heard about and the women who are sitting on benches in parks in November in thin coats. Sickness leads to absence, leads to job loss, leads to loss of accommodation, leads to the charity of strangers, leads to the charity of institutions, leads to Blockley. The city's almshouse is 5 years into a reputation that's in the process of becoming notorious. You've heard things about it. Everyone has heard things about it. The women's wards, which are overcrowded. The medical care, which is inconsistent and sometimes worse than no care. The way people go in and don't come out. This is an exaggeration. But it's the kind of exaggeration that has enough truth in it to travel. The full name is the Philadelphia Hospital and Almshouse, and it sits on the west bank of the Schuylkill on a large plot of ground in West Philadelphia that's technically part of the city, but has always felt somehow separate, like the city pointing at it from across the river. It was built to house the poor, the sick poor, the old poor, the mad poor, the women in certain kinds of difficulty poor. And it does, in ways that are sometimes humane and sometimes are not, depending on the ward and the season and who's in charge this year. The women's ward, second hand from women who've been there or know women who've been there, what it looks like. Beds in rows, too close together. 70 women in a room designed for 40. The smell of illness concentrated and multiplied. The doctors and medical students who come through on rounds and treat the patients, the women, as cases rather than people. Teaching cases. The poor bodies used to teach the next generation of medicine in ways that the bodies of Rittenhouse Square women never are. The teaching hospital is where rich men's children learn medicine on poor women's bodies. You heard this once from a woman at the laundry, said flat and factual without particular anger. It wasn't anger she felt about it, or at least not the kind of anger that burns outward. It was the kind of knowing that sits like a stone. You think about Dr. Whitfield who shook your hand. He was decent, he was careful, he told you things clearly, he didn't ask about your moral character, but he was also young, which means he trained somewhere. He practiced on someone. The streetcar brings you back to South Philadelphia as the light is fading. The streets smell of cooking. Saturday is the day when the boarding houses make their best suppers, when the women who've worked all week have the energy for something more than the daily cabbage. On the corner, the produce vendor is selling the end of his day's stock at reduced prices, and you stop and buy apples. 3 of them, good Pennsylvania apples, late in the season but still firm, for 3 cents. You eat one on the walk home. It's sharp and sweet and tastes like the orchards outside Germantown, like autumn in a form that's actually autumn and not just November cold. The boarding house Saturday evening. Supper is beef stew, which Mrs. Kessler makes with real beef and real potatoes and onions and pepper, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the best things you've eaten since you came to Philadelphia. The room is warm and full of women who've been at different kinds of work all week and are now, for this one evening, fully present at a table eating something good. The conversation is louder on Saturday evenings. The week is done, Sunday's coming. Nora Flanagan from across the table. You went. I went, you say. And? Chemical irritation from the lie. It's not. You pause in the middle of a room of listening women. It's not serious. Probably. Just needs to clear. The table is very slightly less loud for a moment. Then it goes back to normal, which is its own form of relief. Agnes, who works the pressing irons, reaches across and touches your arm briefly. Good, she says. Bridget Malone, 16, from the Match Factory. Can I have your apple if you're not going to finish it? I'm going to finish it, you say, and take the last bite. The laughter is easy and real. Sunday. You go to Mass in the morning, St. John's on 13th Street, because you go to Mass every Sunday, and because the habit of it, the incense, the Latin, the shared silence of 100 other people who are also doing their best and also finding it difficult, is one of the things that helps. The church is cold, the way churches are cold in November, the stone holding the November air and releasing it back into the congregation. You sit in a middle pew between Agnes and Clara, and you breathe the incense and the stone cold, and you listen to the priest, and for 40 minutes you don't think about the Tubbs or the cough or Dr. Whitfield or Adele Schmidt or Blockley. In the afternoon you write another letter, this one to your sister Bridget, not the Bridget Malone at the boarding house, your own Bridget, 17, who's been asking about Philadelphia, about whether she should come, whether there's work. You write, there is work, there is always work. But you should understand what the work is before you come. You write 3 pages about the laundry, about the tubs and the lye and what the hours are like and what the room at Mrs. Kessler's is like and what the winter is like. You write it clearly and without embellishment, because your sister is 17 and smart and deserves accurate information. Then you write, if you come, come in the spring. The spring will be better. There will be work for the exhibition, and the city will be different. Come in March and give yourself time to get used to it before the winter comes again. And tell Mamma I'm well. You address it. You set it on the crate to post Monday. Then you put on your coat and go outside for an hour, because Dr. Whitfield said to get outside air when you can, and you intend to be a good patient. Monday arrives, the week's rhythm resumes, the cold walk, the hot room, the tubs, the lie, the cough. But there is now a slight difference. A corner turned, not large enough to be dramatic, but real. You have a prescription. You have an appointment in 2 weeks. You have information about what you have and what it is and what to do about it. Information is not nothing. Margaret Howe at the next tub glances at your hands on the first morning. The lard has done something, not a transformation. The cuts are still there. The redness hasn't left. But the skin is slightly less cracked, slightly more intact. The difference between a week of neglect and a week of attention. She nods once. Better, she says. You go to work. The next 2 weeks have a different quality than the 6 weeks that preceded them. Not easier exactly. The work is the same, the cold is the same, the money is the same, tight arithmetic. But the weight that was sitting on top of everything is slightly smaller. The thing you were keeping your eyes away from has been named, and naming a thing, even a frightening thing, takes some of its power. The cough doesn't disappear, but it doesn't worsen either. The prescription helps. The cracked window at night, with the extra blanket Mrs. Kessler provides, helps. The outside air on Sundays helps. There are other things. Margaret Howe brings you a salve one Wednesday. Something her mother used to make, she says, for hands that take damage from wet. Work. It smells of beeswax and something herbal you can't identify. It's better than the lard. Nora Flanagan tells you about a position opening at the Women's Exchange on Sansom Street. Not laundry work, but food service, counter service, and the pay is slightly less, but the chemical exposure is considerably less. She doesn't push. She just tells you it's there. You file the information. The Centennial exhibition construction is proceeding. In the newspapers, you read Mrs. Kessler's papers in the evenings now, a habit you've developed, because information is useful and the papers are there. There are daily dispatches from Fairmount Park, a building for machinery, a building for agriculture, a women's building. The architects' names, the nations participating, the technologies that will be displayed. One article says there will be an experimental telephone demonstration, a device for transmitting voice over wire. You read this twice because it seems more fictional than factual. You tell Clara about the telephone. She looks at you with her wide Lancaster eyes and says, "Is that real?" And you say you don't know. You read it in the paper, which is the honest answer. 2 weeks after your dispensary visit on a Friday afternoon you go back. Dr. Whitfield looks tired, more tired than before, with the particular tiredness of someone who is in their training years and working hours that are just as long as yours in different ways. He listens to your chest again. The full procedure, the stethoscope, the deep breaths, the follow-up questions. Better, he says, and the word lands differently than it sounds, because he says it with the tone of someone who means it as a medical assessment rather than encouragement. Better how, you say? The sounds of irritation are less pronounced, the tissue is recovering. He makes his notes. You've been using the medication every day, and sleeping with the window? With an extra blanket, you say, my landlady's provision. Something in his expression does a thing that might, in different circumstances, be called appreciation for the pragmatics of the situation. Continue both, he says, and come back in 4 weeks if the cough hasn't cleared, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Cautiously, you say. Medicine is not always certain, you say. You mentioned. This time there's definitely something in his expression. Miss Callahan, he says, writing something else in his notes. You should know, if you're ever in a situation where the work becomes untenable from a health standpoint, the dispensary can provide a letter to your employer. Documentation. It doesn't give you leave exactly, but it's documentation. You look at him. This is not something you expected him to offer. Not because he's unkind, he's not, but because the connection between medical assessment and the economic realities of employment is not usually the dispensary's business. Usually they treat the body and send you back to whatever made it sick in the first place. That would be useful, you say carefully. I thought it might be, he says. Closes his notepad, stands. 4 weeks. December comes. The city changes in December in ways that are partly beautiful and partly just cold. The streets get their Christmas displays. The shop windows on Chestnut Street are done up with holly and ribbons, and the new electric light demonstrations in 1 or 2 establishments, which draw crowds of people who stand in front of the window looking at the lights with the expression of people seeing something that hasn't quite connected with anything they know yet. The laundry is louder in December with the holiday hotel accounts. The Continental Hotel alone sends 3 times its usual volume. The women work longer hours when the volume spikes, 10 minutes past closing, then half an hour, then sometimes a full extra hour when the machines have fallen behind. You work the extra hours. Everyone works the extra hours, mister. Hartman pays overtime at time and a quarter, which is something. Your hands are in the water more than ever. The salve from Margaret Howe and the lard you now apply every night, methodically, before bed, keep them from splitting as badly as they would without. But the hot water and the extra hours take their toll. By mid-December, the cuts are back. Not as bad as before, but back. And your back, which had adjusted somewhat to the posture of the tub, is recalibrating in the direction of complaint under the longer hours. This is the body being used. This is what $4.50 a week buys. Not just your time and your labour, but incremental portions of your physical self. The cuts and the aches and the roughened skin and the cough. These are the costs written in flesh rather than dollars. You're not the only one who knows this. Every woman at the tubs knows it. Nobody says it in those terms because saying it in those terms is the kind of thing that makes the rest of the day impossible to get through. But you know it the way you know the arithmetic of the room on Lombard Street, in your body constantly without having to think about it. The week before Christmas, Something happens at the laundry that you've been told happens sometimes and hoped you wouldn't see. One of the boilers. The copper boilers at the far end of the room are run at high pressure, particularly in December when the volume is up and the temperature needs to be maintained for the heavy soiled items. They're old. 2 of the 4 were installed when the laundry opened in 1869, and they've been maintained inconsistently, because maintenance costs money, and Mr. Hartman's employer, who is not Mr. Hartman but a man named Sullivan who owns 3 laundries in the city and comes to this one perhaps twice a month, considers maintenance an expense to be deferred as long as possible. On a Thursday morning in the 3rd week of December, the second boiler from the left makes a sound you don't have. Words for accept, wrong. A low metallic groan, then a sharp release of steam from a fitting that shouldn't be releasing steam, then a noise that isn't an explosion. The newspapers will later not call it an explosion, but is a violent failure of pressure that sends steam and hot water in a lateral burst along the wall. 3 women are near it. 2 of them are at tubs far enough along the wall to be hit with steam, but not the worst of it. They're burned. Hands, faces, the exposed skin of their forearms above the rubber aprons, but not badly. Not in a way that's going to require hospitalization. The 3rd woman is Annie Riley. Annie Riley is 19 years old and she works the boiling vat, and she's close. She is going to be fine. You learn this later, at the end of the day, when Nora Flanagan has gone to Jefferson Hospital and come back with a report. Burns to her hands and forearms, significant but not catastrophic. She'll recover, she'll have scars, but right now, in the moment, the sound and the steam and the screaming, because Annie Riley screams involuntarily, the kind of scream that comes out of pain before you have a chance to decide about it. The laundry stops. 40 women, all of them stopping what they're doing, all of them turning toward the sound. And then, immediately the response that happens in rooms full of women when something goes wrong, which is not panic. There's very little panic, actually, but rather the rapid reorganization of everyone's attention toward the person who is hurt. Margaret Howe is there first. She's moving before you fully understood what happened. She has a cloth from somewhere, from her apron, from whatever was nearest, and she's there. Mr. Hartman is there a moment later with the box kept near the wall, the box with the bandages and the carbolic acid and the things needed for exactly this kind of situation. The 2 women who were hit by steam are already at the sink. Cold water, immediate, automatic. They know what to do, because in a laundry you learn very quickly what to do when you're burned, because it happens. Annie Riley. You watch Margaret Howe with Annie Riley. The efficiency of it. The care. The particular tenderness of a woman who has worked with damaged bodies long enough to know how to be with them. Not squeamish, not dramatic, just present and effective. Talking to her. You're all right. You're all right. Look at me. The burns are on your hands and your arms. We're going to cool them down. Look at me. Annie Riley is crying, but she's looking at Margaret Howe. Mr. Hartman sends someone to call a cab to Jefferson Hospital. This costs the laundry money and he knows it, and he sends someone anyway, because whatever calculations he runs, this one comes out clearly. The women who are hit by steam, they're okay, they're being attended to, stay. Annie Riley goes to Jefferson Hospital. The rest of the Thursday is quieter than any Thursday you've worked. Not silent. The work goes on, the water goes in and out of the tubs, the pressing machines run. But quieter in the way of rooms that have been shaken and are settling. The conversations are lower. The usual background laughter is absent. You work. You think about Annie Riley's hands. You think about the boiler which Mr. Sullivan's maintenance schedule had last serviced in August. You know this because Margaret Howe mentioned it, with no particular emphasis, the way she mentions things that she wants to make sure you know without appearing to editorialise. You think about the difference between Annie Riley's hands in the hospital today and your hands in the tub right now, and the fact that the distance between those two things is mostly luck and proximity. Annie Riley was close to the boiler because that was her station. You're at a tub because that's your station. The assignments were made by Mr. Hartman on the basis of scheduling and availability, not some careful assessment of relative risk. This is also a thing you understand the way you understand the arithmetic of the room, not with dramatic feeling. You don't have the energy for dramatic feeling, but as a fact about how the world is organised. After closing time, as you're leaving, Margaret Howe says something. She says it quietly, not to anyone in particular, to the air almost, but you're next to her so you hear it. She'll have those scars her whole life, she says. You don't answer, because there's nothing to answer. It's true. She puts on her coat. She goes home. That evening at the boarding house, the story travels the table. Nora Flanagan has the hospital report. Annie Riley is treated and expected to be discharged by Saturday. The burns are significant on both hands, but won't affect her function long term, the doctor said. She'll have a few weeks of recovery and then be able to work. Whether the laundry will hold her position is a separate question that Nora doesn't answer because nobody knows. Sullivan's going to fix the boiler, Nora says, now. He should have fixed it in August, says someone. He will fix it in December because if he doesn't fix it in December, Jefferson Hospital will have questions, and if Jefferson Hospital has questions, the city will have questions. This is the mechanism. Not that Annie Riley's hands mattered. They do. But that the chain of accountability is injury, hospital, questions, liability. Fix the boiler to avoid the next hospital, which avoids the next question. You eat your supper. The beef stew again, Mrs. Kessler's December tradition apparently. Clara, who has now been in Philadelphia for 3 months and has lost some of the Lancaster wideness in her eyes, says, she should have been given a safer station. The table is quiet for a moment in the specific way it goes quiet when something young and true is said by someone who hasn't yet learned to keep it to themselves. Yes, says Nora Flanagan, she should have, and moves on. December in Philadelphia. You go to Fairmount Park again, the Sunday before Christmas. This time you go further, up to the park's northern section, where the Centennial exhibition grounds are being built. You can see them from the fence, the framework of enormous buildings in various stages of construction, the skeletal ribs of the machine hall visible above everything else, a structure so large that it reads more like geography than architecture. 160 acres of it. The World's Fair. They're constructing a women's building. You've read about this in Mrs. Kessler's newspapers. Designed by a woman, Sophia Hayden, who will be 21 when the building opens. The first woman to graduate from MIT's architecture program. Built to celebrate women's work and women's achievement in the 100 years of the Republic. You stand at the fence and look at the construction. The women whose achievement is being celebrated in that building are a particular kind of women. Women who painted and sculpted and wrote and invented and organised. Women who had the time and the resources and the social position to produce things that could be catalogued and displayed. The women whose achievement keeps the city running will not be represented in the women's building. You're not bitter about this. Or you are, slightly. But the bitterness is not the primary feeling. because bitterness requires a particular ongoing energy that you don't have in large supply. The primary feeling is something more like seeing clearly, seeing the shape of the thing, understanding how it works. The women's building is being built partly by the labour of women in the boarding houses of South Philadelphia who will never go inside it. You stand at the fence for a while, looking at the skeleton of things being built. Then you walk home. Christmas Day, the laundry is closed. You go to Germantown. Your mother opens the door before you knock, because she's been watching from the window. You know this because she's doing it when you come up the walk. She thinks she's subtle, she's not. And when she sees you, she does the thing she always does, which is hold your face in both hands and look at you as if reading something. You're thin, she says. I'm the same, you say. You're thin and your hands are terrible. They're fine. They're not fine. Come inside. Your father's there, and your sister's, and the kitchen is warm in a way that the laundry is warm but different. Home warm, human warm, the warm of a room that has had the same family in it for 20 years and carries that history in the walls. You eat more than you've eaten in months. Real food, your mother's potato bread, roast chicken, apple cake. You sit at the table that you sat at as a child and watch your sisters and your father and your mother, and you feel the specific homesickness that comes when you're home. The ache of knowing you'll leave again, of understanding that you've been away long enough that it's both here and not here anymore. Your mother doesn't ask about the cough. This is deliberate, you can see her not asking, and you appreciate it. Your father says, "How's the work?" "Good," you say, "steady." The manager treats you well? "He's fair," you say, which is approximate. Your younger sister Bridget, 17, round-faced, determined, is watching you with the same expression you must have had at 17, looking at women who came back from the city, looking for information in your face. "Is it worth it?" she says. You look at her. You think about what to say. "Yes," you say after a moment, but it's hard in ways that are hard to explain before you experience them. "Come in March," you say. Like I said in the letter, come in March. She nods, storing this, the way you stored information when you were 17. After the meal, your mother takes your hands. She does this the way she's been doing things your whole life, practically without asking, just sitting down beside you and taking your hands and looking at them. "Lard," she says, "every night." "I'm doing it," you say. "You need this." She goes to the kitchen and comes back with a tin. Her own version of Margaret Howe's salve, you realise. A mixture of lard and something herbal, and the smell is different, but the purpose is the same. Take this with you. You take it. She holds your hands for a moment longer, not doing anything else with them, just holding them. "Your father worries," she says. "Tell him not to." "He worries because he loves you. I worry because I know you." She looks at you. Her eyes are the same eyes you look at in the mirror, which is a thought you've had before and still surprises you. "You're all right?" "I'm getting there," you say, which is true, which is the truest thing you can say. You take the streetcar back to Philadelphia in the late afternoon, watching Germantown resolve into the city. The houses getting closer together, the streets getting narrower, the noise building from neighbourhood quiet to urban constant. You have your mother's tin of salve. You have a wrapped piece of apple cake she pressed on you as you left, wrapped in a cloth, for Clara because you'd mentioned Clara. You have the full feeling of a real meal, and the slightly hollow feeling that always comes after going home. The streetcar deposits you at 10th and Chestnut. You walk the rest of the way south through the city's Saturday evening version of itself. taverns and street lamps and the smell of coal smoke, and somewhere roasting chestnuts from a vendor on the corner of 12th. You buy a bag of chestnuts. You eat them on the walk home, burning your fingers slightly on the shells, tasting the mealy sweetness of the nut inside. The year ends, not dramatically. The last day of 1875 at the laundry is a Tuesday, and the work is the same as any Tuesday. And at 7 o'clock you put on your coat and wrap your shawl and walk home through the cold with Nora and Clara. On Lombard Street, someone has put a candle in almost every window. You don't know if this is a tradition or a coincidence or Mrs. Kessler's doing. The candles cast warm light on the cobblestones, and you stop for a moment and look at the row of lights and think, well, another year. A hard one partly. A year of coughing and cold and cracked hands and the boiler and Annie Riley and the dispensary and the woman on the bench in Fairmount Park who needed to know about the Women's Union. But also Margaret Howe's salve, Nora Flanagan telling you about the Friday clinic, the apple cake, the view from the park of the Centennial grounds, Dr. Whitfield shaking your hand, the things that helped. You go inside. Mrs. Kessler has made something with apples and cinnamon, a cake, or something cake adjacent, and set it out in the parlour, and the 12 women of the boarding house gather around it with small glasses of something Mrs. Kessler declares is respectable wine, and there's laughter and noise and the specific warmth of people who've survived a year together and know it. To 1876, says Nora Flanagan, raising her glass. The Centennial, the exhibition, 10 million visitors to the city and every one of them needing their sheets laundered. More laughter. You raise your glass. To 1876, you say. January 1876, the year of the Centennial. The cold is serious now. Not November's tentative cold, but real, January cold. The kind that freezes the Delaware into rough grey plates and makes the walk to the laundry genuinely dangerous when the ice forms on the cobblestones. You learn the trick of walking close to the buildings, where the stones are slightly less icy. Clara has already learned it, which tells you she's adapting. Your cough by January is largely gone. Not completely. There's a remnant in the mornings that the cold brings out, 3 or 4 coughs before your chest warms up. But the afternoon deterioration has stopped. The deep tissue rawness that made the evenings difficult is gone. Dr. Whitfield, at your 4-week appointment in early January, pronounces you significantly improved, with the pleased tone of someone for whom significantly improved is good professional news. The tissue has recovered, he says, listening to your chest. The irritation is minimal. You're not out of the woods entirely. He pauses, his professional caution intact. But you're out of the worst of it. What does not out of the woods mean, you say? It means that your lungs have been under sustained stress, he says, choosing his words with care. And sustained stress leaves things slightly less resilient than they were before the stress began. It doesn't mean you're heading toward anything serious. It means you should continue to be careful. Continue to be careful, you repeat. The laird. Every night, you say. The outside air. Every Sunday. The Dr. Whitfield, you say, not unkindly. I'm going to take care of myself. You've been telling me what to do and I've been doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. Something in his expression again. That flash of something that in different circumstances might be called a smile. Good, he says. Then I have no further prescription. He pauses. Come back if anything changes, he says. I will, you say. You mean it. February. The laundry replaces the second boiler. The replacement process is loud and disruptive and takes 2 days, during which the women work around the construction crew with a combination of patience and the particular attention of people monitoring whether a new boiler is being installed correctly. Margaret Howe watches the installation with the concentration of a foreman. She says nothing to anyone, but she watches. When it's done, the new copper tank in place, the fittings secured, the gas lines tested, she walks back to her tub and goes back to work. She doesn't say anything about it, but you notice in the days after that she checks the boiler visually when she passes it. Not dramatically, just a glance. The look of someone keeping an accounting. Annie Riley comes back in February. Her hands are healed, scarred, as Margaret Howe said, but functional. And she takes her place at the boiling vat again, which is her station, because her station didn't change just because the boiler failed. The first time she's back at the vat, you watch, without being obvious about it. She goes through the motions of the work with the careful attention of someone reintroducing herself to a thing that hurt her. Slower at first, more deliberate, her hands moving with an awareness they didn't have before. This is also a kind of knowledge, the knowledge that lives in the body as caution. March. Your sister Bridget arrives. She shows up on a Thursday evening with a bag and a letter of introduction, and the exact face she had at 17, looking at you, looking for information. Except now she's the one here. Mrs. Kessler takes her. There's been a vacancy since January, when one of the upstairs women got married and moved to Kensington, and puts her in a room with 2 other girls new to the city. You show her the route to the laundry because Mr. Hartman is taking on extra staff for the Centennial season, and you've put in a word. You show her the pharmacy, you show her the dispensary on Chestnut Street, the Friday clinic especially. You tell her about the salve and the lard and the window cracked open at night. You tell her about the boiling vat and about standing near the wall when the boilers are running in high-volume season. She listens with the seriousness of someone receiving important information. Not frightened. Bridget is not given to fear, she's given to determination, but attentive. "And you're all right," she says. "Getting better," you say, which has been the true answer for a while now. "I got here and it took some adjusting. It'll take you some adjusting too. But it's worth it," she says, like she remembers you said this. "It's worth it," you say. "It's just..." You look at your hands, which are better than they were, but are still the hands of someone who's been doing this for 16 months. It costs things. Just be aware of what it costs. She looks at your hands, then she looks at your face. "Okay," she says, "you go to work." April. The Centennial exhibition opens in May, 1 month away, and the city feels different. The newspapers are nothing but Centennial reports. The streets are changing. The nicer neighbourhoods are painting and planting and putting up American flags. Hotel rooms are being booked from as far away as Boston and Charleston. Special trains are being arranged from every city in the country. 10 million visitors expected. This is a number that doesn't fully resolve into anything real, but you feel it in the laundry. The advanced surge of linens, the extra accounts, the additional hiring that has brought the Monday workforce up to nearly 70 women. Margaret Howe is training 3 new women. She does it with the same brisk efficiency she does everything. Practical, no waste, no drama. You're training too. This is new. This is the thing that happens when you've been somewhere long enough. You become someone who knows things, which means you become someone who teaches them. The first morning you show a new woman, Catherine, from somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, 20, hasn't worked in an industrial setting before. How to work the tub. You hear yourself saying things you didn't know you knew. The water should be hot enough to see steam, but not hot enough to scald through gloves immediately. You'll find your tolerance. It takes a few weeks, and your hands will look terrible while you're finding it. But you will find it. The motion is your whole forearm, not just your hands. If you work just your hands, they'll give out by afternoon. The rotation should come from here. You show her, and here. She watches. She tries. Yes. And if your hands crack, you say, lard, every night. You hear Margaret Howe from the next tub make a sound. It's what I was told, you say, to no one in particular. And it worked. May 10th, 1876. The Centennial exhibition opens. You're at work. The laundry has been at full capacity since the first of the month. The Continental Hotel and 3 other hotel accounts sending double volume as every hotel room in the city fills with visitors from everywhere. You work the full shift, and after the shift closes you take the streetcar to Fairmount Park because you're going to see it. On the opening day, the president is there, Ulysses Grant, not the most popular president but present, standing at the entrance to the exhibition grounds while the Marine Band plays and cannon fire from the Navy Yard echoes down the river. The newspapers will say 300,000 people come on the opening day. You're one of them. The admission is 50 cents, which is significant, which you've been saving for, and you go through the gate. The machine hall, you've read about it. You thought you understood it. You didn't understand it. The building is 1,400 feet long and 360 feet wide. It covers 14 acres under a single roof. Inside, the greatest collection of industrial machinery ever assembled. Power looms and steam hammers and lathes and printing presses and everything else the century has produced, all running simultaneously, powered by a single enormous Corliss steam engine at the centre of the building that drives the entire hall through a system of shafts and belts. The sound is extraordinary. The accumulated noise of 1,000 machines in operation, not the familiar sound of the laundry's manageable 4 boilers, but something larger, a mechanical symphony that you feel in your chest as vibration before you hear it as sound. The smell is oil and iron and steam and something you can't quite name, the specific smell of industrial power. You stand in the machine hall for a long time. You're surrounded by visitors from all over the country, all over the world, pointing and commenting and reading the information placards and being impressed. They're here to see the future. They're here to see what American industry has produced in 100 years. You're here because you wanted to see what the other side of the noise looks like, the side that gets displayed instead of the side that runs the daily machinery. The difference between the Corliss engine on a pedestal and the boiler on South Street. Both of them steam-powered, both of them requiring someone's attention. The Corliss engine is attended today by President Grant himself and the Emperor of Brazil. They turn the wheels that start it. The crowd applauds. The boilers on South Street are attended by women who earn $4.50 a week and whose names are not in the papers. Both things are true. You hold both things at once. The women's building, you go there after the machine hall. It's smaller than you expected. Modest, really, in comparison to the machine hall's industrial swagger. A long, low building with a classical colonnade designed with a care for proportion that reads as feminine in the way that feminine was being defined in 1876, which is to say elegant and contained. Inside, painting, sculpture, needlework, embroidery, decorative arts, industrial art, medical practice, exhibits by women in every field they had been allowed to enter and several they had not. A library of books written by women, a room of scientific apparatus, a room of inventions. You walk through slowly. You look at the paintings, which are good, better than you expected, having not expected very much. You look at the medical instruments. You read the information about women's medical education, about the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia. It's in the papers sometimes. The Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, the first in the world. You think about Dr. Whitfield. A woman could be him. There are women who are him, are training to be him at the Women's Medical College right here in Philadelphia. Dr. Ann Preston, who ran the college until she died just this year. The women doctors who attended to women in this city because women needed medicine that wasn't filtered through a male gaze that couldn't quite see them as people, rather than problems. This is being built, slowly, imperfectly, against significant resistance. But it's being built. You think about the dispensary, the Friday clinic, the way Dr. Whitfield shook your hand. These are small things. They add up. The exhibition closes at sundown. The crowds thin. The gas lamps come on throughout the park grounds, and the light is warm and the evening is mild, May, finally after the winter. And you walk the path back toward the streetcar stop with hundreds of other people, all moving in the same direction, all having been, in their various ways, at the same event. On the bridge over the Schuylkill, you stop and look. The river below you is silver in the evening light. The exhibition buildings are lit from within and without, and their reflection wavers on the water. Behind you, Philadelphia, the full night skyline of the city, the church spires and the skeleton of City Hall in progress, the dense dark mass of the neighborhoods. This is what the view from the bridge looks like at night, in the year the country turns 100. You stand there for a moment. Your feet hurt. You've been on your feet since 5 in the morning, and the walk through the exhibition covers a lot of ground. Your back is the familiar complaint. Your hands, in the evening cool, ache where the cuts are. But the cough is gone, really gone, not suppressed. The chest that has been complicated for 6 months is simply a chest again. Breathing without incident, taking in the cool, river-smelling air without protest. You breathe in, you breathe out. Below you, the Schuylkill moves in the way rivers move continuously without reference to anything above them. The walk home, the streetcar is crowded. Everyone is heading back from the exhibition. Working people mostly, the ones who could afford the 50 cents on a weekend evening, the ones who'd saved for it or prioritized it the way you did. They're animated, talking about what they saw. The telephone. Bell demonstrated it today, apparently. 2 people spoke to each other through a wire across the building. The Corliss engine. The women's building. You listen to a man behind you telling his wife about the engine. 2,000 horsepower, he says. You can't comprehend it until you see it. You can't comprehend it until you stand next to it, you think. Until you feel it in your chest. Until you understand, viscerally, the difference between power for display and power for use. But you don't say this. You sit in your seat and look out the window at the Philadelphia streets going past, and you let the tiredness of the day come over you in a wave. It's a good tiredness, not the grinding exhaustion of a laundry day, though the body underneath is made of many laundry days. It's the tiredness of having done something, gone out, seen something, been part of something, back at the boarding house, late. Later than usual, 10 o'clock, which is late for someone who gets up at 5. Mrs. Kessler is still in the kitchen, which means she waited up. Not ostentatiously, she's doing something with bread dough, kneading it methodically, but she's there. The exhibition, she says. Yes, you say. Worth it? You think about the machine hall, the women's building, the river at night from the bridge. Yes, you say. She nods, returns to her bread. There's soup on the stove if you haven't eaten. You haven't. You eat standing at the counter, the same counter you've stood at every morning for 16 months, eating the soup that's thick and good and hot. My sister starts Monday, you say, between spoonfuls. I know, says Mrs. Kessler. I've spoken to her. She'll be a good tenant. She'll be green for a while, says Mrs. Kessler, like everyone is. Yes, you say, and then she won't be. Mrs. Kessler looks at you over her bread dough with the expression she uses when something is self-evident and therefore worth noting. That's right, she says, then she won't be. That night, you lie in the dark of the room that is yours and Agnes's and Clara's, Agnes snoring with her characteristic depth, Clara breathing quietly, the sounds of the street outside below the open window, the city's night sounds, which you know by now as well as you know anything. The horse on Lombard Street sometime around 11, the saloon door opening and closing on the corner, the church bell marking the hours from St. John's. Your feet ache, your back aches, your hands are the baseline ache they always are at day's end. But you breathe easily. This is, you think, what it costs and what it gives. What it costs. Your hands, incrementally. Your back, daily. 14 hours of yourself, 6 days a week. The cuts and the burns and the chemical air and the constant arithmetic of enough and not quite enough. What it gives. $4.50 a week, minus $1.75 for the room, minus the food, minus the prescriptions, a position, a known face at a known tub in a known building, Margaret Howe's salve, Nora Flanagan's accuracy, Clara's wide eyes slowly narrowing into competence, Mrs. Kessler's soup, and some other things harder to account. The knowledge that you can handle things, that the city that seemed monstrous when you arrived has become the air you breathe, familiar if not easy, that the women who work alongside you know more than they're ever credited for, and pass what they know along in the practical currency of salves and clinic information and the right way to hold your arm when you work a tub. That something is building, slowly, imperfectly, that wasn't there before. The Women's Medical College. The exhibition. The telephone, if it works. The building's going up. This century turning. You're not in the part of that story that gets written down, but you're in it. Outside the city breathes. The mills run. Somewhere the river moves. The gas lamps on Lombard Street cast their yellow pools. Somewhere in West Philadelphia, the Centennial grounds are going dark for the night. The great engine in the machine hall, they've turned it off for the evening. Tomorrow morning they'll start it again. Tomorrow morning you'll be at the tubs, same as today, same as yesterday, same as the days ahead. But tonight, rest. Let it come. The tiredness that's in your feet and your hands and the muscles of your back, this is the weight of the day settling. Let it settle. Let the day go. Let the city outside do whatever it does without you for a few hours, because it will manage without you, and you've earned the absence. Your sister Bridget is downstairs in her room, asleep probably, or lying awake where you lay awake on your first nights here, listening to the sounds of the city that were strange and are still strange to her, and will become familiar. You could tell her. It gets familiar. It becomes yours. The cutting smell of lye that you carry home in your hair, the specific weight of wet linen, the hot water and the cold morning air, the way the city sounds at midnight from a window on the third floor. This is Philadelphia in the year 1876, the year it turned 100, the year the world came to see what America had built. You helped build it. Not the monuments, not the exhibitions, the dailiness of it, the clean sheets, the kept going. That's also construction. The years will pass. The laundry will change. Machines will change it. Eventually, we'll alter the work into something different, something requiring different bodies in different positions, doing different damage. The buildings on South Street will be torn down and something else built. Mrs. Kessler's boarding house will eventually not be Mrs. Kessler's boarding house. Lombard Street will be different, and Philadelphia will be different, and the gap between Chestnut Street and Lombard Street will change shape, even if it doesn't disappear. But people will still wake before dawn and walk to work in the cold, still stand at tasks that cost their body something, still find the women who know which clinic to go to, and what salve helps, and how to stand so your back hurts less. Still pass that knowledge from hand to hand. Some things don't change. The body that needs tending, the knowledge that travels between people who are trying to get through, the specific warmth of a kitchen at the end of a hard day. Let it come. The darkness behind your eyes, the breath that slows, the sounds of the city going further away, not because they're not stopping, but because you are. You've earned this. Take it. You're warm enough, safe enough, still here. Good night.